Hello, everyone. Today we will be looking at the definition of education as the first of an eight series podcast bundle titled Education, a Foundation Series. Why is it important to properly define education? The proper definition of education would help us to compass the meaning, significance, or historicalness of education. For example, ancient Greece, Rome, or the Middle East promulgated education for mostly reading and writing, which later evolved into what we now call general education or academia. Meanwhile, education resulting from industries or corporations for the last couple of centuries wasn't promulgated to or prevailing among and common to the general public. But these industries made the planes, cars, phones, hospital equipment that we use today. Without them, the world is back to the medieval period. So, what is education? Simply put, education is any activity that imparts knowledge and skill. However, this definition is too broad and hence can be highly misconstrued because we could so easily and ambiguously adjudge or define activities or institutions within the superset of education. So let us disambiguate the above definition by allocating legal parameters such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 26, Part 2, which posits education shall be directed to the full development of the human personality. Education shall be directed to the full development of the human personality. The legal definition of education requires knowledge or skill to be directed to full development. Full development means containing as much development as possible, containing the full quantity to the greatest degree or extent, and relatively from the greatest degree or extent. Hence, the legally binding denotation of education is industry education because industries possess or exhibit the greatest extent of development in society. Complete healthcare, which greatly requires a holistic wide of hospital technologies, is from the healthcare industry, not from the medical doctor or a single healthcare professional employed by the industry, because a single individual cannot serve the needs of a community, let alone a nation or the world. Communication is provided by the telecom industry, including IT, clothing by the textile industry, transportation is provided by the automotive, aviation industries. An individual cannot single handedly produce the number of cars or aircrafts required by the world, but industries such as Toyota, Mercedes, Airbus, Boeing can, which delineates them as the natural mentors of food development or development to the greatest extent in our society. Consequently, from the aforementioned legality, education has no definition in itself. Education can only be defined by the extent of development, meaning every thread in the education superset is defined by the full development coefficient. In that respect, what is the legal direction of education? Full development or development to the greatest extent? Who offers development to the greatest extent in our society? Industries or corporations? Who should provide education? Industries or corporations? Very simple. Here are some flagships to the definition of education. Industry education is the default definition of education. Industry education is the default definition of education. Existing industries such as the automotive, aviation, IT, healthcare, telecom, advertising, infrastructure, construction, transport, retail, financial services, sales, e-com, foreordain or predefine the educational choices that we make. The wrong, substandard definition of education would lead to the wrong kind or type of education. The wrong or improper kind or type of education would automatically and substantially lead to substandard deficient development. Substandard deficient development will inevitably be the end of you financially or economically. Parents have the prior right to choose the kind of education that shall be given to their children as stipulated in the international law, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 26, Part 3. So if you and your family unanimously use the wrong definition of education to choose the wrong kind of education or type of education, you won't be able to inculcate or blame anyone else in the near future. Thank you for listening to this podcast on the definition of education. In our next podcast, we will discuss the right to education.